Kingsley Moghalu was a deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. He is also a presidential aspirant. He is a professor of international business and public policy at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy in the United States. Dr. Moghalu, many Nigerians consider you to be one of the most technocratic of all the aspirants vying for the office of the president in 2019. Eyebrows were raised when you said you were going to equip and employ 1.5 million policemen across the country. How do you intend to fund that process?
Very good. I want you to understand, first of all, that security is job number one. If you don't have security, the country is falling apart, and that's what is happening today. If I decide to shift as president, I decide to shift resources from a lot of wasteful expenditure. There are security votes in this country that are not accounted for. There are billions and billions of naira. If I decide to shift a lot of those votes to securing the lives of Nigerians by having an effective, well-trained and well-equipped police force, what's wrong with that? The problem we have in this country is that we're too cynical. We have become so used to low-level governance and performance that when somebody comes with a vision and says, we deserve to be at this level and we are actually going to do it, some people begin to ask you, how are you going to do it? As if it's impossible. Why is it that other countries in the world are effectively policed and Nigeria is not? So I can understand the question, but the fact is that I have the answer. And that is that we're just going to reallocate resources to the highest priorities. For me, as president of Nigeria, there will be three very important priorities for spending. Number one is security. And I'm talking about quality spending, not spending a lot of money to put it into the arms of corrupt cabals.
It appears the outlook of oil, sorry to cut you, the outlook of oil prices, it looks great at the moment, yeah? And the Nigerian national budget is financed by crude oil receipts.
But that's precisely...
So assuming in Nigeria where the oil is sold for $30 per barrel.
Precisely.
What do you do?
Precisely. That is why, but before I answer that question, let me come back to my priorities. National security is going to be job number one. Education sector reform is going to be priority. We are going to set up a 500 billion naira venture capital fund that will help to create millions of new jobs in this country. On the 1.5 million new policemen, remember that is 1.5 million new jobs. So we're just going to reallocate resources to what really matters. Nothing matters more than the security of the lives and property of Nigerians. Now, on the question of the oil price, let me tell you that the problem we've had with managing our economy is reliance on oil. In my presidency, two things will happen. We're going to move away from oil dependency because we're going to run an innovation-driven economy that will create production inside Nigeria. Lots of inventions by young kids in this country, young men and women who are inventing and innovating. This venture capital fund I've talked about will invest in these innovations, turn them into mass production, and the economy will expand. Number two, we are going to improve the process of taxation. We're going to expand taxation into the informal economy, which is 65% of Nigeria's GDP today. There are many market women, traders, orange sellers, a lot of people who are doing business in Nigeria, but they're not paying tax. The reason they're not paying tax is understandable. They don't trust the government, that the money they put into taxes will be well used. I am telling you that we will have a social contract with Nigerians, a solemn social contract in which everybody will have to pay their taxes because we will use the mobile telephones to track everybody in Nigeria to pay their taxes. But they will see the results of their money in real time. Better hospitals, better schools, better security, better police.
Allow me to restrict you a bit. I know you did mention some of the key things for you. What are the top three priorities of a Kingsley Moghalu presidency?
Number one, security. Number two, the economy. Those are the top, and of course,
So top two.
Security,
Yeah.
economy, and unifying Nigeria. Creating a nation, healing Nigeria and building a nation. I think it's so important. We're not a nation today. We're just a country. And we're so divided among ourselves that it's very difficult for us to come together to think about economy, to think about security. So unifying this country with the kind of leadership that sets the example and says we are all Nigerians. We're not just Igbos, we're not just Hausas, we're not just Yorubas, because that's what's keeping Nigeria poor. People just focus on the wrong things and worship the gods of small things.
According to the National Bureau of Statistics, about 16 million Nigerians, and I'm assuming mostly young people, are unemployed at the moment. Do you know how many jobs your presidency is supposed to be creating?
I've told you, first of all, the 1.5 to 2 million new jobs in the police force. That's guaranteed.
Right.
Now, through the venture capital fund that we're going to set up, if you have millions of young men and women who don't have jobs, and we are able to invest in businesses for them, those businesses will employ them, and the people they will employ will also have jobs. So there's going to be a lot of new jobs, millions. It's not easy to quantify it at this time.
This is the first 1 year in office.
Yes.
What would be the number?
I think within the first 2 years, I think that's more realistic. I don't like to make promises just to be popular. I am a technocrat, so I tell you what is doable, what is achievable. I can tell you that within the first 2 years in office, our government should be able to create 4 to 5 million new jobs.
How would you make that happen?
Exactly because of what I've told you. I've told you the police force will be 1.5 to 2 million new jobs. Another 2 million jobs created through business expansion, through investments in agriculture, and through empowering young people in innovation. Look, when a young man or woman invents a new product, like the Nepalese iron, which a young man in Nigeria invented an iron that can function without electricity. Nobody has invested in that iron to turn it into millions of irons that Nigerians can use who have no electricity. When you do that, middlemen are created, wholesalers are created, retailers are created. Job creation is done through the marketplace. It is not, the government itself does not create the jobs. The government creates the environment where the jobs are created. That's how we will create millions of new jobs.
We have been told that subsidy is back, and it has become the most realistic way to keep oil prices at 145 naira. Yeah. And what would you do? Would you remove subsidy at the risk of the masses, or at the risk of increasing the price of PMS for the masses?
Let me tell you that the subsidy is one of the biggest scams in Nigeria. As a leader, your duty is to take the people on a journey. Explain to them the reason you are taking them on that journey, what the destination of the journey is, and how we're going to work it. Now, concerning the subsidy, is it correct to subsidize consumption? How can a country like Nigeria be exporting crude oil and be importing refined petroleum and subsidizing the importation of refined petroleum? What else is the definition of madness? Let me explain. You have supposedly the price of PMS at 145, right? In many parts of Nigeria, that is not the price. So at the end of the day, you might as well have a proper market price, which by the laws of the market, eventually the price will come down. Petroleum subsidy, at some point in the future, I'm not saying that's the first thing I will do when I become president, but we're going to take a look at the economy. And if, as I believe it is necessary, that subsidy will eventually have to end, we will prepare for how to end it so that Nigerians do not suffer unnecessarily. But I will explain to Nigerians as their president why perpetual subsidies of petroleum consumption, imported fuel consumption, are very bad for them. The money that the government pays in subsidy, trillions of naira, that's money that will build better hospitals for them. That's money that will equip a better police force for them. And people say, where are you going to get the money for the police force? There's so much money that is being wasted in Nigeria that if you actually allocate it properly, Nigeria will be able to achieve a lot.
You do plan to privatize the NNP.
Yes, partially.
Is this the same position you hold for state-owned companies like Ajokuta Steel Plant?
Why not? I don't believe that total government ownership of corporations can work in a country like Nigeria. There was a time that that was possible, but Nigeria's values in the society have become so degraded over decades. People don't work with the values they used to in the 40s and the 50s and even the 60s, when you had state companies that functioned well. Since the 1980s, 1970s, 1980s, all our state-owned corporations have gone down in performance. They're not productive. The only way to revive state-owned companies and make them productive is to inject private sector ownership. Look at LNG. You will wonder whether LNG, the way they operate, is in the same universe as the NNPC. The reason the LNG works well and makes a profit is because there's private sector investors, so everybody is disciplined. But when the government owns the thing, in Nigeria, everybody sees it as it's no be your papa business. All of us can just do whatever we like, make as much money from the corners as possible, and leave the country broke. The NNPC is a dump of corruption, opacity, and unproductiveness. The only way to make it work for Nigeria is to partially privatize it. And that I will do as president. We will put the ownership of those shares on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Just like the Saudis today, they're privatizing Aramco, the state-owned oil company. It's part of removing the economy from the dependence on oil. The problem in Nigeria is that our leaders don't like to take difficult decisions that will, in the medium to long term, benefit the people of Nigeria. The reason they don't want to take those decisions is because they want to be popular. But leadership is not a popularity contest. Leadership is about making people's lives better. And if you have a child, you know that sometimes to make the life of that child better, you have to spank the child, or you have to discipline the child when the child is becoming lazy or unproductive. Does it mean you don't love the child? No. You love the child. That's why you're taking the tough decision to say, look, if you don't behave yourself, you're not going to get this privilege or that privilege. So that is what makes the child, gives the child an incentive to behave well or to study hard or to work hard. This is the same with leadership in every sphere. You don't lead people effectively just by pandering to their populist tendencies. After a while, it begins to work against their own interest. So our leaders have worked against Nigeria's interest by refusing to do what is necessary for Nigeria to become better. And that is what tells you that we don't have competent political leaders, because they don't even understand what leadership means.
You plan to reduce recurrent expenditure
Yes.
to 50% and increase capital spending to 50%
Sure.
within 2 years.
Yes.
Several technocrats are of the opinion that the services is broken and overbloated.
Yes.
Does this mean that you're going to cut the size of the civil service?
We will look at the civil service very, very carefully. I think it's not correct for the civil service to be taking 70 to 80% of Nigeria's budgets. In what world does that make sense? That 1 million federal civil servants take up 60% of the country's revenues. It's not correct. So what we're going to do is that we're going to take a very good look at that. And there may be a need to reposition the federal civil service in a way that reduces recurrent expenditure. Even before then, remember that the Oronsai report recommended that a lot of parastatals should be merged. That report was never implemented precisely because of lack of political will. We will implement it.
One of the major issues right now, I think you must be aware, you might possibly be aware of it or you've read it in the news, is the health of President Muhammadu Buhari. And your big agenda did not say much about healthcare besides political commitment and the plan to build 6 world-class hospitals. Would you say that this is a well thought out plan?
Oh, of course it is. You see, there are 2 levels of my healthcare plan. One is at the level of primary healthcare, which, if you read my book, Build, Innovate and Grow, which is where I have laid out a lot of my vision and plans. We talk about reforming the healthcare system by making sure that there are functional primary healthcare institutions in the 774 local governments of Nigeria. That means, first of all, they have not just doctors, but at least nurses that will provide primary healthcare to children primarily. Now, the 6 world-class hospitals in the 6 geopolitical zones takes care of people who have all these diseases for which people either have no cure in Nigeria or those who have the money go abroad. So you must have those 2 levels of healthcare. So I have thought very carefully about it, and I have said that we are going to put 15% of the budget to healthcare, minimum. So education and healthcare in my government will get the biggest share of the budget.
But how would you defend this against the fact that Nigeria currently already has federal teaching hospitals that are mostly ill-equipped?
Yes.
And as compared to world-class hospitals, is this the biggest issue for the health sector?
It is a very big issue. When you say you have several federal hospitals,
yeah,
it doesn't mean, and when I say we will establish, it doesn't mean it must be a totally new. We can take one
not an ultra-modern hospital.
No, we can take one of the federal university teaching hospitals in each of the 6 geopolitical zones and turn it into this world. When I say world class, it does not necessarily have to be the best hospital in the world, but it should be very good by any standards. That's what I mean. We can do it. Don't we deserve it?
What is your plan for primary health care, maternal and child mortality?
Yes. One is, number one, we are going to take a needs assessment, a proper needs assessment by healthcare experts of what we need to do to cut down child mortality in Nigeria. Number 2, we are going to make sure that we have enough well-trained nurses to provide maternal health care, primary health care. Primary health care doesn't always have to be, doctors are involved, but it's more of nurses, if you see what I'm saying.
And midwives.
And midwives, yes, exactly. So we are going to remember that there are a lot of Nigerians who are healthcare professionals abroad, nurses, especially midwives, doctors. I have a plan to bring them back from the diaspora and put them to use in the maternal health care, in this area of primary health care. And we will fund it, because we're going to be setting up a diaspora fund. So again, ask me where the money will come from. There is money in the government of Nigeria that is being so hugely wasted. You will scream if you knew where your money was going in this country. And that's money that could do many, many good things for people in this country.
As the former deputy governor of the central bank, I don't think I have a doubt that you know
I know where the money will come from.
You talked about power clusters in industrial areas.
Yes.
Some people do not consider this a unique plan.
Okay.
What most Nigerians want today, it would be light.
Yes.
What is your generation and distribution target? How many megawatts are we talking about here?
Let me tell you something. They don't consider, some people may not consider it a unique plan. A plan does not have to be unique to work.
Right.
So let's first of all get that straight. Now, what I want is for Nigerians to have electricity, right? And we have looked at the things that are stopping them from having electricity. The centralization of the national grid is bad for electricity generation and distribution in Nigeria. The grid should be decentralized, regionally or state by state. This is a technical matter that technical experts will take care of. Then, what we have now in hydro and gas powered, I believe should go mostly to industrial production. Why? Because if our industries produce at 24 hours electricity capacity, the price of goods in Nigeria will crash. Do you know that 40% of the costs of doing business in this country are electricity generation costs? Imagine what would happen if those costs are brought down even by half, or 80 to 90%. So the strategic thing to do is to shift electricity primarily to industrial areas and begin to move consumer power towards renewables. Last week, I had a meeting with an expert in solar energy who is preparing a plan for me for how to take Nigeria into the solar energy phase at a mass production level. So I'm already talking to the experts in this area who are advising me. Nobody's an expert in everything. I'm not an expert in power. But my business as a leader is to talk to those who have the solutions and to empower them. I say, look, my business is that within 2 years, Nigeria should have a minimum of 10,000 megawatts of power and make it happen. And it's very possible.
You are from the southeastern part of Nigeria.
Yes.
Do you feel the Igbos are unfairly treated?
Well, there are many parts of Nigeria today that feel marginalized. The Igbos are only one among several.
Right.
And at different parts in our history, at different times in our history, different ethnic groups have felt marginalized. After June 12th, the Yorubas felt horrible. The Niger Delta militants came up because, again, they were feeling marginalized. So marginalization happens in Nigeria because of a failure of our leaders. I, as president of Nigeria, will bring an inclusive leadership, a big tent in which everybody will find space. There will be equity, there will be justice. I will work with the best hands from across this country, whether they be Yorubas, whether they be Fulanis, whether they be Igbos. So the real solution to Nigeria's problem is not focusing on marginalization. It is about doing something about it that creates the confidence and builds trust amongst all of us as citizens of Nigeria.
Are you in support of the agitations of Biafra?
No, I do not believe that secession from Nigeria is the solution. But I understand the agitations for Biafra. They come about because it's a cry for justice. So my approach as a leader is to address that issue across the whole country, not just with the Igbos, but with the northern people, with the southwest, with the north central. Look at the killings in north central. Are they Igbos? They're hurting heavily. Shouldn't a leader be addressing those things? So when we pick and choose, Igbos, Yorubas, it's not, there's a problem across the whole country. And my business as president of Nigeria is to address that problem. It's not to be focused on just Igbos or Yorubas no, we're dealing with the problem nationally. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work to create an inclusive governance. I'm going to work to build the trust of all Nigerians of all ethnic groups by making it very clear to them, I'm not interested in where you come from. I just want a fair deal for all Nigerians. That includes Igbos, but not just them.
What does true federalism mean to you?
True federalism to me means that when you have a federation, the federating units create a center, and that the federating units are fiscally independent of the center. Those are the two definitions of true federalism, just reduced to a very simple level. In Nigeria, you have the center, the government of Nigeria, creating federating units. Today they create a state. Tomorrow they create a local government of their choice. This is a perversion of federalism. Number two, the federating units, so-called, are not independent. The states go cap in hand to Abuja every month for distribution of oil rents. That's why Nigeria is unstable. That's why our economy is bad. That's why the fiscal management of our resources is weak. So, I believe that Nigeria needs a constitutional restructuring that allows the federating units to control their resources and pay sufficient taxation to the center that runs common services like the foreign affairs, like national security, like the central bank, like immigration, and all those things, and allow the regions. I believe that the 6 geopolitical zones should be the federating units. The reason that constitutional restructuring is very necessary is because that is actually what will revive Nigeria's economy. All the 6 zones are economically productive, but you need to have economies of scale, which a large population and large expanse of land can bring. If you just do it state by state, it's not enough. Many states in Nigeria on their own are not economically viable.
Do you support the creation of state police?
Yes, I do. As part of constitutional restructuring, there will be state police, but there will also be federal police. But most of the police in Nigeria, like the 1.5 million policemen and women I'm talking about, after Nigeria is restructured, they will be brought down to the regions. And a corps will remain at the center to perform some federal duties in the Federal Capital Territory and just coordinate, keep an eye on national security more broadly. We will not allow a situation where regional police or state police is used to subvert the authority or the sovereignty of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I would not want that.
It appears you are very keen on issue of nationalism and orientation.
Yes.
What is the meaning of your one nation, one destiny philosophy? Is it like Buhari's war against indiscipline?
No, it's not the same thing. My one nation, one destiny is the product of a worldview that we are not the only country in the world that has a diverse population. It is the product of a worldview that our diversity can become our strength, because each component part of our nationhood has something that it brings to the table. Can we bring all these things together and create the political identity of citizenship? That is what I mean by one nation, one destiny. What is your primary identity? I am a Nigerian. I happen to come from this part of Nigeria. I will not be asked what is my primary identity and I will say I am Igbo, I am Yoruba. Look at Nigerians. Every time you go abroad, and once you say you're from Nigeria, people start asking you, are you Yoruba? Are you Igbo? Are you Hausa? They don't ask that of people who are from Kenya. They don't ask that of people who are from Ghana. They don't ask that of people who are from Sierra Leone. Nobody knows their tribes. Because in Nigeria, we have not resolved the question, the national question. Are we Nigerians because of the political identity of our citizenship as Nigerians? Or are we Nigerians because of our ethnic nationality as Yorubas or Fulani or Igbos? As a leader, as president of Nigeria, I will focus and prioritize on the political identity of our citizenship. That is what I mean by one nation, one destiny.
Did you vote during the 2015 general election? And if you did,
Yes.
what did you vote for between former President Goodluck Jonathan and incumbent President Muhammadu Buhari?
In 2015, during the elections, I happened not to be here. I was teaching and researching abroad. But in 2011, I voted. But in 2015, like many people in Nigeria, I had very high hopes that the government of President Buhari will bring Nigeria into a new era. Sadly, that hope has been disappointed. And I don't think this administration has the solution. And that's one of the reasons I'm running for president, because I think it's time to get off the sidelines. It's time for us to stop defeating ourselves psychologically by thinking, oh, it can't be done. Oh, will they allow you? Who is they? They is me and you. If we come together and cast our votes, we can change this country.
Some people consider you a Jonathan apologist.
No.
You told the UK Independent newspaper,
Yes,
following the suspension of your former boss, now the Emir Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, that he overstepped his boundary as a bank governor and praised Goodluck Jonathan as one who did not interfere with the CBN.
Yes.
Do you stand by your comments today?
Now let me contextualize that comment. First of all, that was just a fleeting disagreement over the approach that the governor brought to the issue at that time. I am one of the biggest fans of Sanusi Lamido Sanusi. We are very close friends and always will be. I have nothing but the highest regard for him. He's a brother to me. I have just, since I returned to Nigeria in November 2017, I have visited Kano several times. So we're constantly in touch. Now, the situation at that time was a very unique situation. He believed that, and I did not disagree with his belief, that there was a lot of corruption in the oil sector in Nigeria. But I was a bit concerned about the institution of the central bank. I was not defending Jonathan. I was not an apologist for Jonathan. Far from it. When I said that with the independence of the central bank, that Sanusi was leading, that was a fact. And that was also a fact that Sanusi defended strongly the independence of the central bank. Now, sometimes people who agree on things may agree 97%, and then there may just be a little bit of a small 3% disagreement. I don't think that should be overblown. But let me make it very clear. I do not believe that the traditional political class in this country, whether represented by the current APC or the PDP whether of Jonathan or of anyone else, has the solution to Nigeria's problems. Nigeria needs a radical change in political leadership. I will be announcing my political party platform to contest for the elections in 2019. It's not going to be the APC, it's not going to be the PDP. If I was an apologist for anybody, then I suppose I would go and join their party. But I was not an apologist for anyone. I was just an independent-minded technocrat, period.
How would you rank the Muhammadu Buhari's administration's war against corruption? What would you do differently?
Yes, the war against corruption of this administration is a complete failure. It's a complete failure because, first of all, no high-ranking official that we know of has been brought to book conclusively with proof that he or she was corrupt. What we have is wars waged on the pages of newspapers. What we have is a lot of noise, a lot of sound and fury, signifying nothing. How to fight corruption is as follows. As president, that is what I will do. My fight against corruption will start inside my own government. That's what I'll do differently. I'm not going to first of all go after the opposition to demonize them or be publishing, very, very questionable looters lists, quote unquote. No, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Fighting corruption is part of good governance, accountability in governance. So it's a daily job. It's not something you just spend your time. But in Nigeria, some politicians have made noise about it because they have used it to hoodwink Nigerians. Because they know Nigerians are suffering. So when you come and talk about corruption, you are striking them at a place of emotions. And so you use that to obtain power. But at the end of the day, your government is just as corrupt as any other. There are allegations of corruption against members of this government. There has been no accountability. So where is the integrity of this approach, supposedly, to fighting corruption? That's my problem. So I believe that the fight against corruption, as president of Nigeria, should start inside my own government so that that fight is legitimate. When we now come for people who are in the opposition, nobody will quarrel. Number two, I believe that the EFCC should become independent from the presidency. As president of Nigeria, I'm going to move for an amendment to the EFCC Act that strengthens the EFCC as a truly independent institution that can investigate financial crimes and have them prosecuted. I don't need to get involved as president. It is my getting involved as president that leads to a temptation to use these institutions to go against your political enemies. That's not correct. And then, thirdly, very, very important, we are going to put in place technology that makes the processes of procurement and budgeting transparent. That will bring corruption down. Budget padding. I've said it before, that when a budget is prepared for the federal government, I will subject it, first of all, to a forensic audit before I submit it to the National Assembly. This will take care of budget padding, so that if we have any problem with the budget, we know it's coming from the legislature, not from the executive branch. So these are the things. We will take a look at how contracts are awarded and the process of procurement.
You pledged to 50-50 gender parity.
Absolutely, and I'm committed to it.
I would take it that your running mate will be female.
I will consider a female running mate.
Okay.
Certainly.
I'll hold
50-50, I said I will consider. So,
okay.
So be careful what you're holding me to.
Okay.
Yes, don't go out and write a headline, because journalists love sensation. Don't go out and say Moghalu promises to. And then tomorrow, I don't want that. I want to be very clear about what I'm saying.
Well, it's not certain yet.
I have not selected my running mate. Okay. Until I make that selection, first of all, I have to become the formal candidate of a party. It is at that point that the question of your running mate comes up. And at that point, I will take the decision. Now, let me tell you what I mean by saying that we will target 50-50 gender equity. It means that in political appointments, we will seek to appoint as many women as we appoint men. That is to say, qualified women and qualified men. We're not going to engage in tokenism, padding things with women of unproven competence, just so that it will be that I'm appointing women. That's disrespectful to women, because there are many women who are actually competent. Number two, beyond the numbers, beyond policy, I'm going to revolutionize gender issues in Nigeria, because my government is going to embark on a program of social education that attacks the cultural causes of gender bias and gender discrimination. We're going to educate Nigerian citizens on why women should have equality of opportunity and why it makes us a better society when that happens. We're going to give women opportunities to access capital for their small businesses, whether it is the woman frying akara in the village or the woman that is opening a fashion shop on Allen Avenue, or maybe in Lagos or somewhere in Abuja. So we're going to make sure, because women contribute a lot to our economy, especially through the informal economy, the informal sector. So we're going to empower them to be able to continue to contribute to the economy in a much better and bigger manner. And I think that this is good for society all around.
Doctor, you have an opportunity to make a final pitch to the Nigerian voter. Why should anyone vote for you and not incumbent President Muhammadu Buhari? Because Nigeria requires three things which I bring to the table. I will heal Nigeria and build a nation. Today, Nigeria is a divided and broken country. Nigeria needs a total war against poverty. Poverty is increasing in Nigeria today. Unemployment has more than doubled, where 9 million people have lost their jobs since 2015. Number three, Nigeria's standing in the world needs to be restored. Who is the candidate that has the credentials, that has the track record, who has actually done these things well? I have built and fixed broken nations in my career in the United Nations over 17 years. I have managed Nigeria's economy as Deputy Governor of the Central Bank successfully and with good results. We stabilized Nigeria's banks through the banking sector reform. We brought inflation down from double digits into single digits. When I left the central bank in 2014, inflation was at 8%. Today it's at 13 or 14%. And I have been a diplomat in the UN. I understand international relations. I understand how to project Nigeria to the world. So I've been a professor at one of the world's most prestigious universities, at Tufts University, teaching economic development and transformation. So the question is, my dear fellow Nigerians, let us not make the mistake we made in 2015 and jump from frying pan into the fire. It is the question of the status quo remaining or returning to power does not even begin to arise, because the performance report card is clear. It's an F. So the question is actually, who should be the next president? That's what I'm discussing. I'm not discussing whether those who were there before should come back. They can't or shouldn't come back. But I am then offering myself as the kind of leader who will unify this country, who will manage the economy well and take Nigeria into the 21st century and build a different future for our young people. You deserve accolades, our youth, even though you have been called lazy youth. You deserve accolades, but you deserve accolades not because the government has done much for you, but because you have succeeded in spite of the failures of governance in Nigeria. Thank you, Dr. Moghalu. You're welcome. Thank you for your time. Yeah, thank you.